and good day to all of you. We have a great crowd, great community here with us again today. More than 100 people have joined us from around the country, around the world. I should say up front that this will be our last this fall in our series, conversation series. We will start again in the new year. Given we're getting into the holiday season and also the end of the semester, we will take a short break and be with you. Our community, which has now have grown over 3,000 folks around the world. Today we have a real treat. We have Janet Barnard from Cox Communications, Cox Automotive in particular, with us, as well as one of our colleagues, a cyber director at Loyola Marymount University. And I apologize in advance, Janet and Yongsun, for very brief introductions to you, given that we want to reserve a lot of time for discussion and some questions as well. And I know you have a lot to share with us today. So let me introduce our moderator for the day on this topic of global talent management first. Dr. Yongsun Peck. He is the director of the Cyber Center at Loyola Marymount University, as well as the Center for Asian Business, which is a very active center in various programs, including business ethics. Yongsun's expertise includes international human resource management, cross-border ventures, joint ventures, and East Asia, besides business ethics. He has a degree from University of Washington, a PhD in international business, as well as master's studies in Latin American studies from the University of Texas, Austin. Yongsun, I know you worked as a country economist at the Export-Import Bank, Exim Bank of Korea as well, before joining academia. And you serve on several journals as editorial board member, including Journal of World Business. And you also served as the president of the Association of Korean Management Scholars, and many, many publications. So welcome, Yongsun, and thank you for moderating this session with Janet today. Our special guest, and we're delighted to have one of our hometown companies, Cox Automotive, Cox Enterprises in general, with us, Janet Barnard. Janet is the Chief People Officer for Cox Automotive, and it's the subsidiary of Atlanta-based Cox Enterprises, which is, of course, I think most of you know, a huge conglomerate with over 55,000 employees, I believe, Janet, around the world, over $20 billion of revenues. Janet, I know you're responsible for the global organization's high performance culture, talent management program, and you support the vision to transform the automotive industry. And I know Cox Automotive had a big hand. The automotive world is very different today, certainly. And I think your organization, you yourself have made a big difference in bringing us to the new age, new technologies. At Cox Automotive, you lead human resources functions, including corporate and field operations, total rewards, employee and leadership development, and organizational effectiveness. You spent also leading time again with Cox Automotive, leading the Inventory Solutions Group, where you served as the president of the Inventory Solutions, and also directed several groups and Mannheim, which is one of your organizations as well, in transforming the company's core auction business to incorporate expanding digital, mobile, and inventory solution strategy. Before that, you were the president of Mannheim, North America, and before that, you served as senior vice president and general manager for Cox Communications in the central region, a region with more than 700,000, almost million customers, more than $1 billion $1 billion worth of voice data video services. So you have extensive experience in media, in communications, automotive industries. But I'll just move on to your some of your distinctions, and there are many. I'll just give a short inventory here. You received the Leadership Character Award in 2016 and Greenleaf Center for Servant Leadership. You've been recognized by the Atlanta Business Chronicle as the Woman Who Mean Business an honoree, and Automotive News lists you in the 100 leading women in North America in the automotive industry. And also you've been recognized by Women in Technology as one of Georgia's top woman leaders. And you also won the 2014 Woman of the Year in Technology Award. How nice to bring technology, to introduce technology, what used to be an old age industry, automotive industry. And of course, you serve on the Board of Governors of Georgia Chamber of Commerce and also on the Cox Automotive's Corporate Responsibility Council. So I will leave it there, but Janet, we are delighted to have you here with us and looking forward to a conversation. And I think, Hannah, you're going to give us a little video, a short video about the company first.
We want to build a better future, where technology is clean, mobility frees us, connections build communities. For the next generation, champions are crowned in living rooms. Doctors come to patients. Your home and cities are smarter than ever before. We got there because we empowered our people today to do the right thing, always. To lead by example, to bring out the best in everyone. To do it all in the spirit of Cox. Armed with a powerful legacy.
May I express this christening sentiment, that this voice will always be an instrument of dignity, culture, and practical service.
And our most important resource, our people, who we are and who we've always been, our values, what we believe in family and community.
We continue forward with our vision
to bring the greatest people together,
working to solve the most challenging problems of our time,
innovating and growing,
and making a little music along the way.
And this is everything we stand for.
That's a nice introduction. Thank you for that video. And Yongsun, please.
Okay, thanks, Tamir, for your very kind introduction. I have participated almost every single webinar GSU has organized since April. This webinar series has covered so many important and interesting topics on international business. However, it is the first time today we focused on human resource management issues. We all know it is people that are most affected by this COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic crisis has brought a renewed focus on human capital and employees. Companies are essentially human-driven, and great talent is an important asset for them. The continued disruption and uncertainty caused by this pandemic have strained employees physically, mentally, emotionally, and also financially. So employees' health, resilience, and well-being have become even more critical to sustaining business. Given these circumstances, I'm really glad that we have an opportunity today to listen to a story from one of the most experienced and influential HR executives of a company that operates globally, Cox Automotive. Good morning, Janet.
Good morning, Young Soon. Thank you so much for the great introduction.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. We just watched your company's intro video, but it seems it mainly features Cox Communication and doesn't really talk much about Cox Automotive. So could you please briefly tell us about global operation of Cox Automotive and your role as a Chief People Officer? The COVID-19 pandemic hit hard the automotive industry due to economic recession and limited mobility of people. So could you please share with us how much your business has been affected by this pandemic?
I'm happy to, and welcome to everyone today. And for the US participants, happy Thanksgiving to all of you. You saw a little bit about Cox Enterprises as a whole, and more specific to Cox Automotive, we are the only division of Cox that has global operations. So about 10% of our revenue or so comes from outside the US, and we hope to see that grow as a percentage of the total. We have about 27,000 full and part-time employees that work globally. About 4,000 of those work internationally, and about $7 billion in revenue. In the US, about 2/3 of all car shoppers shop through brands you may know, like Auto Trader and Kelley Blue Book. We handle about 8 million cars through the doors, physically or virtually, of our Manheim wholesale auto auction. So if you ever wonder what happens to a car you trade in, the dealer either sells it to another consumer or they sometimes send it to auction and it comes to Manheim much of the time. So that's a little bit about the automotive division, and I'll talk a little bit more about our purpose and our vision to transform the automotive industry and provide automotive services to do that. But a quick look at the impact to our business, to the point of the question. I don't know how many of you in your everyday studies talk about the 90% economy, but that's something that's been termed around the circles that we operate in, and economists have talked about. That's where we expect the economy to be for the foreseeable future until there is a vaccine that can be widely distributed. And what happened is that because so much of our business is transactional, that almost overnight in April, our business went almost to zero in some parts of Cox Automotive. And then we experienced this dramatic, what the economists call V-shaped recovery. So almost overnight, that business came back, but not all the way back to 100%. So that's the V-shaped recovery that economists will often talk about. We certainly saw it in the automotive industry. And because of pent-up demand and low supply, because in April and March, you saw many of the lockdowns around the world shut down, in some cases fully, production of automobiles. And we had no fewer people to satisfy in terms of their transportation needs. And many of those people opted for personal transportation versus shared transportation because of COVID. So there was high demand, pent-up demand because of the lockdowns, low supply because of the lockdowns. And so when the doors opened up again in the summer, we saw some dramatic improvement in performance in the industry. AutoNation, one of the largest US groups, had a record third quarter. Ford had a big comeback in earnings and of course operates globally. GM is still pushing hard on the future of electric vehicles, including their investment in a company called Nikola. And used car prices surged to the highest level in half a century. And so the business did come roaring back, but not back to where we were previously. Our international business rebound was pretty reflective of what we saw in the US. Their restrictions were a bit more severe in the first lockdown, so they lagged in their recovery a little bit behind the US, but more because of timing. And so, when we think about what that's done to our business and what has played out in the industry showed up for us, there is a silver lining. Things like our Manheim auction business had to move to all digital overnight. So just as we sent our employees home overnight during the lockdowns. The businesses, because of the lockdowns around the country, required our auctions to stop doing physical business and move to all digital. So we saw some progress on the digital side of our auction business that would have probably taken 10 years. That literally happened overnight, where we were about 50% digital previously in terms of sales. We went to literally 100% overnight. So, and on the Auto Trader, Kelley Blue Book side, the shopping sites, so forth that some of you may be familiar with, we created many products that we'll touch on, and you'll see shortly a little video on those that were catering to consumers who could, for the first time, realistically sit on their sofas and buy a vehicle and have it delivered to their front door, sight unseen and without touching or interacting with anyone at the dealership. Again, something that we were heading in that direction previously, but would have taken much longer without the push from the COVID environment.
Well, I'm a little bit surprised because you mentioned that the auto industry has recovered rather quickly. The information I have from EIU, the Economic Intelligence Unit, and actually that they predict the auto industry is not expected to fully recover to the same sales level of 2019 until 2022. Mm-hmm. So that was a little bit of a surprise, pleasant surprise.
Right, a quick recovery, but as I said, to that 90% level. So what you cited in terms of the economic forecast is true for us too. We don't expect to get back to a net growth mode over 2019 until a couple of years down the road.
I see. Okay. I think that you prepared some video, right?
That's right. So kind of a lead into the next question, Hannah, if we can go ahead and play a video.
Has caused an unprecedented fall in
the Department of Labor said it's seeing an unprecedented amount of unemployment applications.
Consequences with unprecedented speed.
Region spared as we fall deeper into crisis. The growing tidal wave of new infections is.
This year has been unlike any other.
1 million Americans filing jobless claims, numbers without a precedent in American history.
Well, you've done some excellent job in pivoting the pandemic by taking new initiatives and programs. Thank you for giving us an overall picture of how automotive industry has been affected and recovered since the outbreak of pandemic. My next question is kind of related to the first question. So we know the definition of jobs has been changed, and COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated that trend, making companies rethink what work is done and how it is done and by whom. Now we are commonly using such terms as digital employees or taskification of jobs. How does HR help your business decide who will perform which tasks and which places?
Right. I mean, certainly the HR function is transforming pretty dramatically, as is the rest of business, and becoming much more data focused, data oriented, and planning oriented, just like our operations in our business are. We're still early in the process of really applying deep analytics to talent and talent planning, but that is exactly what we're tooling for. So we know in our own organization, on my own team, we need that strategic workforce planning skill set and talent and the related tools to apply the data to the planning process. So just one example where we're already seeing this show up in the workplace. So we do what we call condition reports or inspections of every used vehicle that we touch. And I talked about that we physically touch about 8 million of those in a year inside of Mannheim. As you can imagine, that takes a huge workforce. We probably have, between contractors and employees, 1,500 to 2,000 inspectors worldwide who physically walk the car and do condition reports around the mechanical and cosmetic condition of the car. Very labor intensive, quite subjective. And with AI and machine learning now becoming a commercialized and widely available technology, we're applying that to the way we do inspections, and we're using machine learning to visually estimate and detect vehicle damage. And we even apply that to the sounds of the car. So as the car runs, we're actually using machine learning to determine what a certain sound means in terms of diagnosing what might be wrong with the car. And so this, as you can imagine, will completely transform the way a dealer or a consumer might learn about a car that they might buy sight unseen. And so when you think about the impact to our workforce, that's just one example of a large role in our company, employs thousands of people. And we have to really rethink what that skill set looks like in an AI and machine learning world. And then, on the geopolitical stage, of course, it's no mystery to any of us how difficult it's been to move talent physically, both because of difficult to understand and quickly changing immigration policies in the US and around the world, and also impacts of COVID, which we will continue to talk about throughout. We still do it. For instance, my head of Total Rewards is a transplant from the UK, but just using her as an example, she came over a year ago, April, and has been trying now for a year to go back and see her family. And either because of COVID restrictions or because of fears of being able to get easily back into the country because of the changing immigration policies that we have in the US, she hasn't been able to go back and see her family except for one time since she's come over. So Young-Soon, I've heard you use the term globalization instead of globalization, and we certainly are feeling that in our talent management strategy, where we realize that making it easier for people to stay where they are and work where they are is really important in the future of managing talent, because personally and from a regulatory perspective and from a safety perspective with COVID, being able to move around the world has ironically just gotten more difficult.
I see.
And so we've proven to ourselves by moving to work from home overnight back in March 9th, we all went home thinking this was a test, and we haven't been back to the office since. So 50,000 people went to working from home overnight, wherever they were, whether they were in their home country or whether they were here in the US, they went home and haven't been back to work. And again, just like the digitization of our auto auctions I talked about, the fact that we were able to make that move overnight would have taken us a decade or more probably to ever make that decision if we would have made it at all. So that's the silver lining of COVID, is that it's teaching us new ways of working.
I see. Very good. So definitely, whoever can take advantage of this pandemic will be a winner and get stronger in the future and more competitive. The companies need to have all the employee skill data handy. I think that so that when you're reskilling these workers, that you have to make sure the right talent and work can be matched, right, to solve evolving business challenges in real time.
That's
Okay,
right.
I think that we need to get to more important questions. So I'd like to move a little bit quickly. Now, I'd like to ask more specific questions about your company's talent management approach. The recent study conducted by Mercer, I'm sure that you know this HR consulting company, identified the three things that employees want most from their company. The first is a workplace flexibility, a second, a commitment to health and well-being, finally, working with a sense of purpose. I believe employee value propositions should reflect these expectations in order to recruit the best talent. What is the employee value proposition of Cox Automotive? And I also like to ask you to briefly explain how your company retains your talent. In my humble opinion, keeping talent is more difficult and challenging than attracting or recruiting talent, since they have to create a trustful and engaging corporate culture, which is often not easy to do, particularly when people are working remotely. So what effort is Cox Automotive making in order to create this kind of corporate culture?
Yeah, very similar to the Mercer study. We did our own employee journey mapping fairly recently, and the top three needs the employees named there were flexible work environment, career progression, and the opportunity to make a difference. So not so different from the top three items that you mentioned in the Mercer study, Young-soon. So we believe in an employee proposition that empowers our people to do the right thing always. So our why, or our purpose, is to empower people today to build a better future for the next generation. And the opening video spoke to that. So we have three attributes of leadership called our Empowered People model that includes shape the future, champion potential, champion diversity, and unlock potential. And so around that, we form various elements of our employee value proposition, like flexibility and empowerment in our paid time off approach. We rolled out flexible or unlimited time off for our exempt workers in 2020. Now, 2020 has been an unusual year, so have they been able to take that time? Because of the demands has been a challenge for sure. People are tired. We have hackathons to drive innovation and change-driven mindset. On inclusion and diversity, we have an action speak team that we put together that focuses on 8 different work streams around furthering inclusion and diversity. And we'll soon be announcing our goal to improve people of color in executive leadership, which is, like many companies, a goal of ours and something we fall short on. We have flexible career progression and encourage people to move from one part of Cox Enterprises to another. I'm an example. I was at Cox Communications, came over to Cox Automotive. Our leader at Cox Automotive came from another division, and so forth. And then last, we really do believe in communities and our people forming the foundation for what we do in our business. So we are concerned about making this planet a better place. We have goals for zero waste to landfill and carbon neutral footprint and neutral use of water as related to our sustainability goals. And all of our employees are encouraged to live this way at home and live out those values. For COVID specifically, we paid out disaster relief payments to every one of our employees. They all got some money to help adjust to whatever challenges they were dealing with. We've given out $500,000 through our Employee Assistance Fund to help with unusual and extreme needs from some of our employees most in need. We've rolled out mental health and wellness applications like Headspace and OpenFit so that people can take care of their mental well-being as well as their physical well-being. Right. And in terms of the social justice issues, we also rolled out this year six hours of paid time off for employees to be able to go vote, whether it's in local, state, national elections. So a whole host of items that at our core, and you saw in the opening video, you heard the voice of our founder speaking over the radio and how he feels about people. This is at our core, and it's been a part of who we are for the last 120 years. And as leaders, we're held accountable for putting programs and policies and behaviors in place that speak to that. So to your point, Young-Soon, we believe too that retention is the tougher part of the employee value proposition, and that is where we've put all of our efforts.
Great. You've done some amazing things during this pandemic for your workforce. I understand that your company is still owned by family, right? So the family corporate culture tends to embrace more the kind of paternalistic management approach, which is not typical of many American companies.
That's right.
I don't know whether, have you ever heard the theory Z? Probably not, right? So it reminds me of theory Z, William Ochi proposed in the early 1980s, and basically to try to combine the best management practices between the Japanese and American companies. And he proved that actually that, by extracting that the strength of Japanese management style, which is that the long-term orientation, and also that the, care about their employees, and they're more people-centric, paternalistic, that sort of what the management of a company, and then combined with the American company's key attributes. He argued actually that that's going to be the kind of success formula for many companies. I recently actually came across some interesting article reporting, I think it was in the Financial Times, that this pandemic has made the rigid corporate culture in Germany much softer, since a new work environment makes it difficult for employees to exercise collective bargaining or country's unique co-determination system as that they're working at home, spreading across cities or even countries. So my next question actually directly concerns how you manage the global talent. The workplace has become online, as you already mentioned, and global, because the best talent can be found anywhere now. So your talent management must be designed to leverage the similarities and differences among the global workforce that diverge in age, gender, education, and culture. How do you take advantage of this opportunity, and what are the challenges you need to overcome?
Yeah, so we are definitely more thoughtful around tying our talent strategy to our business strategy. That's that strategic workforce planning expertise that we're really early in building out. So thinking years down the road, not months down the road, in terms of what our needs are to fulfill the business strategy. And then identifying corporate athletes that can be versatile and can play multiple roles. We're big believers in that. And we like to give people stretch assignments that are outside of their functional past, if you will. And then most recently, one of the things that we've made a huge move on is we have about 3,000 software engineers in our company. And they had, for the most part, been insourced, if you will, in-house in the US, and employees of ours, which doesn't lend itself well to the flexibility needed as conditions change in the external world globally for a whole host of factors. So we've recently moved to having a significant portion of our software engineers outsourced with a few very key partners that are like-minded to us, that believe in taking great care of their people as well. And those teams are based all over the world, Vietnam, Belarus, multiple locations around the world, which is fairly new for us. And it's teaching our leaders how to lead a global and remote team, for some of them for the first time. Now, what are challenges with all of that? You know, because we've been a home-based, Atlanta-based, US-based company for so many years, we have to help our leaders understand how to think across the enterprise. So we have people who are very loyal to their brands and the brands they represent. And we need people thinking about Cox Automotive globally and the brands that we represent globally. So that really needs to increase in terms of our leadership skills. And then the other thing that, you know, we're all grappling with, and knock on wood, it's worked really well today, but just the technology that connects us. So being able to have meaningful, not just conversation, but innovation sessions and generate creative new ideas in settings like this, when people are remote from each other and don't get to meet up by the water cooler, so to speak. And I will be very honest, that's something we're still very much adjusting to. And at our top level of leadership, when most of us are of an age where we grew up in a world where we were together and face to face more regularly, having to think about that differently and rethink what work looks like post-COVID. How do we, quote unquote, come back is a real focus of ours. We have a whole working team right now that's working on what we call Work Reimagined, so that we can, we're aligning personas with potential work environments and putting together a framework that leaders can use to make the decisions about how and where to place talent. And the real upside of this is being able to unlock talent pools around the world, no matter where they sit. We're talking to a company we're targeting for potential M&A now, who is a small startup, but half of their tech people are scattered in 14 different countries, and they think nothing of it. They go to conferences, they go on open source websites, and they find a great talent, and they ask them if they want to come work for them. That's how they recruit. So those are, we'll need some very different kinds of recruiting practices in this new world.
Okay, great. Well, I have some follow-up questions, but given the interest of the time, I'm going to move to the next question. I'll come back when you have more time. Actually, I was going to, make some comment about in terms of the way you actually recruit this new talent. Do you have any particular target countries? Because we all know, developing countries, actually, they're creating more talent these days compared to the developed countries. So my next question, you already kind of, mentioned that the demographic as well as cultural diversity will continue to define the global workforce as companies seek to fill the shortages. So this leads to my next question. Organization support for diversity, equity, and inclusion, so-called DEI or DI, keeps growing not only in the US, but also across the countries. In the process of talent acquisition, how seriously does Cox Automotive consider and practice this DI strategy, not only domestically, but also globally, to access and leverage global talent? So can you please share your strengths and weaknesses in this regard?
Yes, we, as I've spoken about the DNA of who we are and being a family-owned company, and the treatment and care for people is critical to us. DEI comes along with that. But like many other companies, where we really lack is having the diverse talent in executive leadership. And so we've been working on this, as many companies have, doing a lot of the good things and right things for a number of years, but have not moved the needle very significantly. So one of the things that we now have in place, data-driven and from an analytics perspective, is we identified behaviors that will help us move the needle, and we've tied them to compensation. So two key items that we focused in on, and that is having a diverse slate and interviewing that diverse slate. Because what we found was we've had diverse slates laid in front of hiring managers for a while, but they were, sometimes the diverse people were being intentionally or unintentionally screened out. So interviewing everyone on the slate and having a diverse interview panel, which seems like kind of a no-brainer, but until someone points that out, you sometimes realize you recruited people around you to be on the panel who are like you or like-minded, right? So So we track and report on both of those things, and those behaviors are tied to diversity goals that our executives are then compensated on. So we've got data that drives behaviors that drives, reward systems. And then I hinted at it earlier, but we are about to announce a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal that's several years out in terms of changing the way our executive leadership makeup looks in the company. Because I know as a female executive, I've had numerous people come up to me over the years and say, females in particular who say, effectively, I'm so glad to see someone who looks like me in an executive role, and it gives me hope. So it's not all about the numbers. This is not all about how we look, but there is no doubt about it that people do need to be able to envision themselves in those executive roles. And if they don't feel like people like them are there, it's not hopeful for them.
We have only a couple of minutes left. So I think the one thing clear is that a strong DEI strategy will not only decrease operational risk, but also enhance levels of innovation. We all know that in an inclusive environment, diverse thought and perspective will bring more benefits to a company, right?
Yes.
So here goes my final question. I'd like to wrap up our conversation by revisiting my very first question. In the face of sweeping business change, I believe the HR executive has emerged as a key strategic player in making their organizations more effective and improving performance. What do you think should be the role of HR to effectively meet this challenge and continue to improve global talent management?
So I've put in place a mission statement for our team that is to be great at the fundamentals, easier to do business with, and be great strategic partners that enables a business strategy. So it's that last portion that's really relevant to the question you asked, Young-Soon. We have to be consultants to the business. And in past years, as a function to a large degree, I've seen many of us be administrators and those who are responding to crisis and putting out the fires. And now we have to be strategic business partners and truly be a consultant to guide and direct the business proactively instead of reactively. And that includes digitizing HR also. So we're putting many programs in place to enable self-service, to enable chatbots and virtual assistants so that those administrative kind of details can be done easily and quickly, and we can focus on being great consultants to the business. And that includes putting people metrics in place, just like our operations do.
Well,
so
there's no doubt in my
data
mind, analytics will help HR, as you said, become expert advisors or the consultants on the global talent map, and will also elevate the role of HR to the strategic level. Thank you so much, Janet, for sharing your insights on this vital and important topic of global talent management. Although the COVID pandemic is a difficult time, it can also be your exceptional creativity. Reimagining jobs around the constraint of today's challenging business environment may accelerate the future of work and open up new and innovative ways in how, where, and by whom work gets done. I think that ultimately this can help us build greater resilience and efficiency in organizations and help people live healthier and more sustainable lives. So I think the company need to prioritize human capital as part of a broader sustainability strategy, and we design the organizational structure to become more people-centric, and you've already done that. So now I'd like to toss the ball and turn the floor back to Tamir.
Thank you so much, Young-Soon. Fascinating conversation. I learned a lot actually from this informative exchange. And there's a number of questions here I will get to by our participants, but I'm struck by, Janet, a number of comments and number of best practices that you introduced to the organization. You talked about data analytics and utilizing information that is in the organization and making use of that. In particular, you identified behaviors that lead to better performance, better success, And then based on that, you redirected your hiring, especially on the diversity side practices. You learned a few things from there. So what were some of those behaviors you identified as contributors to success of individuals and their performance?
Yeah, it's, I touched on a few of them. We talked about, understanding that just having a diverse slate of candidates presented isn't enough. That when you have the slate, you have to talk to everyone on the slate. And those in-person debriefs with the interview panels, I just did one yesterday, as a matter of fact. Maybe in the past we would have said, send me your feedback, let me know what you think of this candidate. And yesterday was one of those. For me, we're recruiting an executive as we speak, and we were having that in-person debrief. And our president, the individual I report to, said how I've gotten so much out of this conversation. When he looked at the scoring sheets, it didn't tell him the richness and depth of what the panel revealed when we had the conversation. So that was, it seems small, but it completely changed the conversation. And then the other thing that I hadn't touched on yet is stay interviews. So one of the things that, we talked a lot in this panel about retention. We do a fairly respectable job of bringing diverse voices to the table, but they don't always stay. And especially during times like this, we've done a lot of listening sessions, coffee chats, individual one-on-ones with our high potential players in particular. And it seems to be working because our turnover is down 13% year over year. And our employee engagement score, which is pegged to the question, would you recommend Cox as a great place to work, is the highest that it's been in more than 2 years in our most recent pulse survey. So that showing that we care and making the human in-person connection, even though it's not physically in person, and those listening sessions, I think, have really proven to be a valuable way to keep us connected in a completely remote environment that we're in.
Very interesting, very interesting. Obviously, you've done some remarkable best practice activities. I was also interested in your corporate athletes program, where you identify individuals with promise and give them stretch projects. One of our participants today talks about culture, the importance of culture, cross-cultural differences. Given that you are a global organization with folks from all over the world, you talked about some 3,000 software engineers, for example, working from really distant, geographically distant origins, as well as culturally distant origins. So Henrik, who's joined us from Estonia, who manages an IT recruitment company, talks about this globalized world and to what extent are you able to take or take notice of and respond creatively to cross-cultural differences in your recruiting and retention that you talked about, obviously, and congratulations on your performance on that record as well.
Yeah, I think, again, we're learning a lot about how to lead and motivate employees from all cultures. And I would say, the most important thing that we do is we admit when we don't know what we don't know. So if we have a leader who is new in this global space or hasn't led a remote team before, we really rely on those leaders or those individuals who have done it and who are familiar with different ways of working than that leader might be accustomed to. So we do believe in learning from each other in that way. And again, through these listening sessions, one-on-one conversations, stay interviews, we find out from the individual who might be in Germany or in Australia, or who might be working remote and is never with a team member, we find out from them what their needs are and what they're missing. So just as an example, I did a touch point with every new employee on my team that we've hired since March when we've been remote, because it occurred to me, they've never been in a building that we own. They've never been physically with any employee at Cox. And so my last question at the end of that conversation is always, if I could grant you one wish that would change anything about how you work, where you work, what you do, the nature of your work, the environment you're in, and I could change that for you and it would make it better for you, what would that be? And you would be fascinated to hear the wide range of answers to that question. And it tends to uncover things that I would just never know if I had not had that conversation. So that's what we, this year in particular, have really ratcheted up those one-on-one leader skip level conversations to ask not just about work and the task at hand, but about the rest of their lives. I'll usually ask, how's your living arrangement? Do you have roommates, dogs, kids? Help me understand what you're working around to overcome a challenge every day. So it's basic human connection.
We become a bit more humane in our in the ways in which we touch people, interact with people. Obviously, the circumstances are very different for all of us, but I think it does bring people closer together when you go into issues beyond just the work-related, performance and all that. One of our couple of more questions here. I think we have a couple of more minutes. Trevor Williams, you may know, Global Atlanta, is asking about the impact of recent immigration restrictions on your recruiting. Obviously, with most recently, we've seen these new restrictions where we're trying to preserve US jobs, American jobs during COVID. Can you talk about how this may be impacting, if not your company, but your industry in particular?
I can speak very personally to this. My team has been very deeply involved. We manage the global mobility function. And again, in those 3,000 software engineers I talked about 400 of those are on some sort of sponsored H-1B status. And early in the year, even the end of last year, as this was getting more difficult in terms of global movement of talent, especially into the US, we had to take stock and have some very difficult, honest conversations with some of these individuals in situations where we just couldn't see to the end of getting their sponsorship to come to fruition for a green card. And it was heartbreaking, I will say. These were really tough conversations, but we felt like if we allowed these people to continue to live in limbo, not knowing how long or when these green cards might come through, we owed it to them to be honest with them about that and say, if you have to leave or make different arrangements to take care of yourself personally, we understand. That was very difficult, and it impacted a few hundred of our people in some fashion. It's a big concern of mine as we go forward. I think whether you're in the US or operating elsewhere in the world, frankly, I'll just say flat out, I think it's abhorrent that we are so exclusive rather than inclusive in terms of finding and utilizing and giving great opportunities to diverse talent. And I hope that we will find a different place of center in this world as we move forward and emerge from this COVID world.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. Maybe a final comment question here from somebody in our community, one of our colleagues, Jorge Fernandez, is asking whether you have done any work with the International Rescue Committee in Atlanta, their chapter in Atlanta, International Rescue Committee, and tapping talent, sourcing talent from refugees in the United States who have work status?
That's a great question. I'm not familiar with that organization as being one of our focused groups, but we are constantly assessing those talent pools and investigating where we may have the biggest opportunity, and would love to know more about it.
That's great. Thank you so much. I'll end there and turn it over to you, Young-Sun, for some final comments. And thank you so much again, Janet. It's been very insightful, very educational, very fascinating. Thank you so much.
It's been my honor. Thank you.
Thank you.